Dad's silent revenge.
When my daughter Beverly told me to find somewhere else to die, you're useless now. I packed my bags like the obedient father I'd always been. 3 days later, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, discovering that my supposedly loving late wife Sarah had helped me play the longest game of chess in history. Beverly was about to learn that sometimes the old engineer becomes the mastermind. My name is Richard Coleman, I'm 61 years old, and let me tell you how I went from homeless widower to the man holding all the cards. Because this story has more twists than a circuit board. 2 months ago, I was a retired electrical engineer living quietly in the house Sarah and I had built together over 30 years. When Sarah passed from cancer at 58, I thought my world was ending. We'd been partners in everything. She was the business brain. I was the technical guy. Together, we'd built a modest consulting firm that left us comfortable, though not wealthy by any means. Beverly swooped in during my grief like a vulture in designer clothes. "Dad, you can't possibly manage this big house alone," Shed said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "The maintenance, all those memories. It's not healthy for a man your age." I should have seen the calculation behind her concern. Beverly had always been my pride and joy, my little girl who could do no wrong. When she married Timothy Turner, that investment banker, I was happy Shed found someone who could provide for her. Maybe too happy to notice how they both looked at money. After the funeral, Beverly became increasingly pushy about my situation. She'd bring Timothy over for dinners where they'd corner me with real estate pamphlets and retirement community brochures. "Dad, these places are wonderful. You'd have people your age, activities, no responsibilities. What they meant was no inheritance to split, no inconvenient father to deal with." The final blow came on a Tuesday in September. I'd been living in what Beverly now called our house for 8 weeks since Sarah's death. Still sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't bear to pack up our bedroom. Beverly arrived unannounced with Timothy and 2 large suitcases. "Dad, we've made a decision. Timothy got promoted and we need to move into town immediately. This house is perfect for us." I stared at her, not quite understanding. "Move in, but this is my home." Beverly's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Actually, Dad, according to Sarah's will, I inherited everything. The house, the investments, all of it. I've been letting you stay here out of kindness, but it's time for you to find your own place." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Beverly, surely there's been some mistake. No mistake. Sarah knew I'd take better care of her legacy than you ever could. You never understood money or investments. You were just the engineer. Just the engineer." 30 years of marriage reduced to those 3 words. That's when she delivered the killing blow. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." I packed my things in a day. 30 years of building a life fitting into 2 suitcases and a small box of photos. Beverly watched from the doorway, checking her watch like I was making her late for something important. "There's a nice senior complex on Maple Street," she offered with the enthusiasm of someone recommending a decent restaurant. "Very affordable. I'm sure they have openings." Affordable. My daughter was supposedly inheriting $12 million, and she was suggesting I check into what was essentially a welfare facility for the elderly. Timothy loaded my suitcases into their BMW with the efficiency of someone disposing of garbage. "Richard, you'll love having your independence again," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "No more worrying about house maintenance or property taxes." As we drove away, I watched my house disappear in the rearview mirror. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 decades making that house a home, raising Beverly there, caring for Sarah through her illness. Now I was being driven to a budget motel like an unwanted guest who'd overstayed his welcome. The Sunset Inn was exactly what you'd expect from a place charging $49 a night, dollars a night, a night, 19. The Beverly handed me $200 in cash like she was tipping a hotel maid. "This should cover you for a few days while you get settled," she said. "I'll have Timothy transfer some money into your account once we sort through Sarah's paperwork, some money from my own inheritance." After they left, I sat on that sagging mattress and tried to process what had just happened. In 3 hours, I'd gone from grieving widower to homeless senior citizen. The daughter I'd raised alone after Sarah's early health scares, loved and sacrificed for, had discarded me like an expired warranty. But as I sat there in that depressing motel room, something began nagging at me. Sarah had always been meticulous about our affairs, obsessively organized about important documents. She'd shown me the will years ago, explaining her wishes, making sure I understood everything, and I was absolutely certain that's not what it had said. Sarah had been many things, sometimes stubborn, occasionally protective about financial matters, but she wasn't cruel. The woman Hod held my hand through my father's death. Hud surprised me with tools every anniversary wouldn't have left me destitute. The next morning, I used the motel's Wi-Fi to search for Sarah's attorney, Leonard Brooks, the same lawyer Hod handled our business incorporation and various legal matters over the years. His office was downtown, a 20-minute bus ride that cost me precious cash but felt necessary. Leonard Brooks was a distinguished man in his 70s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When his secretary announced that Mr. Coleman was here about his wife's estate, he looked genuinely surprised. "Richard, my dear fellow, I was wondering when you'd come in. I tried calling your house several times, but Beverly said you were traveling." "Traveling?" That's what my daughter had told him. "Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you about Sarah's will." He looked puzzled. "Of course. Didn't Beverly provide you with your copy?" I gave her the original and several copies after the reading. My stomach dropped. "There was a reading, Richard. You were supposed to be there. Beverly said you were too distraught, that she'd handle everything, and make sure you received your inheritance." The blood drained from my face as the reality hit me. "Mr. Brooks, I was never told about any reading. Beverly told me she inherited everything." Leonard Brooks' expression shifted from confusion to alarm. He reached for a thick file folder, his movements suddenly urgent. "Richard, that's impossible. Sarah's will is very specific about your inheritance." He pulled out a document. I recognized Sarah's neat signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. But as Leonard began reading, I realized Beverly had lied about everything. "I, Sarah Marie Coleman, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved husband Richard James Coleman the following, or primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave him 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $84 million." My head started spinning. $84 million in the house, 70% of everything. Leonard continued reading, his voice growing more serious. "To my stepdaughter Beverly Coleman Turner, I leave $3.6 million to be held in trust, with distributions beginning on her 35th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of Richard following my death." Contingent upon her treatment of me. Sarah had known. Somehow she'd known exactly what Beverly would try to do, Mr. Brooks, I whispered. "Beverly told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house, she gave me $200 and suggested I find a senior facility." The elderly lawyer's face flushed with anger. "Richard, what Beverly has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She's committed multiple felonies. But she had legal documents. She showed me papers, forged most likely, or documents from an earlier draft. Sarah updated her will 8 months before her death, specifically because she was concerned about Beverly's attitude toward money and her sense of entitlement." The room was spinning. All those times Beverly had dismissed my opinions, talked over me during family dinners, rolled her eyes when I tried to contribute to conversations about their expensive vacations or Timothy's business deals. Sarah had been watching, evaluating, making decisions. "There's more, Richard. The trust provision for Beverly specifically states that if she fails to treat you with respect and dignity following my death, the entire $3.6 million reverts to you instead." I stared at him in shock. "Are you saying your daughter just cost herself $3.6 million? Her inheritance is now yours as well?" "You're not inheriting $84 million, Richard. You're inheriting $12 million plus the house and all personal property." The irony was so perfect it was almost funny. Beverly had been so eager to claim her inheritance that she'd triggered the exact clause designed to protect me from her greed. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Leonard smiled, and for the first time since Sarah's death, I saw genuine warmth directed at me. Now, my dear fellow, we call the police about the fraud, and then we call Beverly and inform her that she's about to receive the shock of her life. Can she fight this? With what money, she's about to discover that every account she thought she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset except your house is frozen pending investigation of her fraudulent activities. I thought about Beverly in my house, probably already planning renovations, shopping for new furniture with money she thought was hers. Timothy was probably calculating how the inheritance would affect his investment portfolio. They had no idea that in about 6 hours, their entire world was going to implode. Leonard Brooks' office became command central for what he cheerfully called Operation Justice. He contacted the police, the banks, and a private investigator while I sat in his leather chair, still processing the magnitude of Beverly's deception. The forged documents are quite sophisticated, Detective Patricia Walsh explained as she reviewed the fake will Beverly had shown me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone planned this carefully. You think Beverly had help, I asked? Almost certainly. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge and connections. Well, need to investigate whether Timothy or someone in his financial network was involved. Within 2 hours, every account had been frozen. Beverly's credit cards linked to what she thought were her new inheritance accounts were declined. The house utilities, which she had already transferred to her name, were suspended pending ownership verification. My phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. Beverly's name flashed on the screen. Dad, where are you? There's some kind of mix-up with the bank accounts. They're saying Sarah's assets are frozen. Hello, Beverly. I'm sitting in Leonard Brooks' office. You remember him? Sarah's attorney, the one who read the real will to an empty room while you told him I was traveling, silence. Then, Dad, I don't know what you think you discovered, but I discovered that you're a liar and a thief, sweetheart. I also discovered that Sarah was much smarter than either of us realized. You don't understand. I was protecting you from the complexity of managing all that money. You've never had to deal with investments, or I understand perfectly. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 61-year-old father out of his own house because you thought I was too stupid to notice. Her voice turned sharp, desperate. Dad, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is obviously taking advantage of your emotional state. The audacity was breathtaking. Even caught red-handed, Beverly was trying to manipulate me. Beverly, dear, let me clarify something for you. Not only did you never inherit anything, but your actual inheritance, the $3.6 million Sarah left you, is now mine as well, thanks to a lovely clause she included about treating me with dignity and respect. That's impossible. Detective Walsh is sitting right here if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her. The phone went quiet. I could almost hear Beverly's mind racing, calculating, searching for an angle. Dad, please, can we meet somewhere and talk about this reasonably? I'm sure we can work something out. Oh, we'll definitely be meeting soon. At the courthouse when you're arraigned, you wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest. Watch me. I hung up and looked at Leonard, who was beaming with approval. 20 minutes later, Timothy called. Richard, surely we can resolve this privately. Beverly made some poor decisions, but involving the police seems excessive. Timothy, did you help her forge those documents? Silence, then. Richard, you have to understand the pressure Beverly was under. She was worried about your mental state, your ability to handle large sums of money, so that's a yes. It wasn't malicious. She genuinely believed she was protecting you. By throwing me out of my house and telling me to find somewhere to die, Timothy was quiet. Timothy, here's what's going to happen. You're both going to be arrested. You're both going to face federal fraud charges. And I am going to be sitting in my house, watching it all unfold. Richard, please be reasonable. I was reasonable for 30 years. It didn't work out well for me. The police arrested Beverly at 8:30 p.m. while she was having dinner at Chez Laurent, apparently celebrating her inheritance with Timothy and another couple. According to Detective Walsh, she screamed about false arrest and demanded to call her lawyer, who turned out to be Timothy's golf buddy with no experience in criminal law. Timothy was arrested at his office the next morning. The forensic accountant had traced the forged documents to a printing company Timothy's firm used for creating fraudulent investment prospectuses. Apparently, my son-in-law had quite the criminal resume that Beverly either didn't know about or chose to ignore. I spent my first night back in my house in 8 weeks, sleeping in the master bedroom. Beverly had already moved her belongings into the space, replacing Sarah's careful organization with her chaos of designer clothes and expensive cosmetics. I packed everything into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. The house felt different now, not because Sarah was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. For decades, Id maintained it as our sanctuary, designed around our shared vision of retirement. Now, looking around with clear eyes, I realized how much of myself at ED never expressed in these rooms. Leonard called around noon with updates. Beverly's bail is set at $50,000. Since all her accounts are frozen, she'll have to find someone else to cover it. What about Timothy? $200,000. Apparently, the judge wasn't impressed with his history of financial crimes. Who knew my son-in-law had been under investigation for securities fraud? I certainly hadn't known, but then again, it'd been excluded from most family financial discussions. Beverly and Timothy had always spoken to me like I was a child when money came up, simplifying concepts they assumed I couldn't understand. They were about to learn how much this old engineer had actually understood. 3 days after Beverly's arrest, I was sitting in my renovated kitchen when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Beverly on my front porch wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like Shed aged 5 years overnight. Shed made bail somehow. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Dad, please, we need to talk. We talked yesterday. You told me to find somewhere to die. I found somewhere to live instead. Beverly's eyes were red-rimmed, her usual perfect composure completely shattered. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But am still your daughter, are you? Because daughters don't typically forge legal documents to steal their father's inheritance. I wasn't stealing. She stopped, clearly struggling to find words that didn't sound criminal. You were what, Beverly? I was trying to protect you from making poor financial decisions. You've never managed large amounts of money. Even now, even after being arrested for fraud, she couldn't admit the truth. In Beverly's mind, she was still the victim of my unreasonable expectations. Beverly, let me share something Sarah told me 8 months before she died. She said she was worried about your sense of entitlement, your attitude toward money, and how you treated people you considered beneath you. Her face went pale. Sarah never said that. She said you reminded her of Timothy's mother, Barbara, beautiful, charming, and completely incapable of thinking about anyone but yourself. She told me she was changing the will specifically because she was afraid of what you'd do to me if you had control. That's a lie. I pulled out my phone and showed her a video file. Actually, it's not. Sarah recorded a video message explaining her decision, to be played if you ever contested the will or if you treated me poorly after her death. Beverly stared at the phone like it was a poisonous snake. She knew, sweetheart. She knew exactly who you were underneath all that charm. The only thing she didn't predict was how far you'd actually go. Play it, she whispered. I touched the screen and Sarah's voice filled the morning air, clear, measured, and absolutely devastating. If you're hearing this, Beverly, it means my fears about your character were justified. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that Richard's daughter had more integrity than I suspected. But if Richard is playing this recording, it means you've proven me right in the worst possible way. Beverly sank onto the porch steps as Sarah's voice continued for 3 more minutes, each word carefully chosen, each sentence a scalpel cutting through Beverly's justifications and self-deceptions. By the time you hear this, you'll have discovered that treating Richard poorly has cost you everything. I hope it was worth it. When it ended, Beverly was crying, not the pretty tears Shed used to manipulate people since childhood, but ugly, broken sobs. She hated me, she whispered. No, Beverly, she loved you enough to hope you'd prove her wrong. You chose to prove her right instead. That was the last time I spoke to my daughter. The trial proceeded quickly once Timothy decided to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. He testified about Beverly's role in planning the fraud, how Shed researched document forging, how Shed convinced him to use his business connections to create the fake will. Beverly maintained her innocence to the end, claiming she was protecting me from my own poor judgment. The jury didn't buy it. 18 months federal prison for Beverly, 12 months for Timothy. The judge called it a particularly callous example of elder abuse disguised as family concern. I used $6 million of my inheritance to establish the Sarah Coleman Foundation for Elder Protection. We fund legal aid for seniors facing family financial abuse and support legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. In our first year, we helped recover over $25 million in stolen assets for elderly victims. The irony isn't lost on me. Beverly tried to steal from me to secure her financial future. Instead, she handed me the resources to help thousands of other families avoid what she put me through. I kept the house, renovated it to reflect my own tastes for the first time in 30 years. Sarah's old office became my workshop, where I tinker with electronics projects. Her garden became my reading corner, where I spend evenings with books I never had time for during my working years. Beverly has written me 23 letters from federal prison. I read the first few, which ranged from self-justifying to desperate, before deciding to stop opening them. Some relationships, once broken by betrayal this profound, can't be repaired with words. My financial advisor calls quarterly with updates. The foundation is thriving. My investments are solid, and for the first time since Sarah's death, I'm building a life that's truly my own. 6 months after Beverly's sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor. A woman about Beverly's age knocked on my door, holding a small girl's hand. "Mr. Coleman? I'm Jennifer Walsh, Detective Walsh's daughter. She told me about your case and I wanted to thank you personally." I invited them in, curious. My grandmother was scammed by my uncle last year. He convinced her to sign over her house and savings, then put her in a nursing home and disappeared. We only got her money back because the Sarah Coleman Foundation paid for her legal defense. The little girl, maybe 6 years old, stepped forward shyly. "Grandma Great says you're a hero for helping old people." I knelt down to her level. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just someone who learned that good people have to stand up to bad people, even when those bad people are family." After they left, I sat in Sarah's garden thinking about legacy. Beverly had wanted to inherit money. Instead, Shed inherited a prison sentence and a reputation as someone who steals from elderly parents. I'd inherited something different. Not just Sarah's money, but her wisdom about protecting the vulnerable. Her understanding that real wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you build that outlasts you. The Sarah Coleman Foundation will help families long after I'm gone. Beverly's children, if she ever has any, will grow up knowing their mother went to prison for stealing from her own father. They'll have to decide what kind of people they want to be. Timothy got out of prison last month. I heard he's working at a used car lot in Ohio. His investment banking license was permanently revoked and his mother Barbara still hasn't spoken to him since the trial. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have accepted Beverly's apology letters, tried to rebuild our relationship. But then I think about the other seniors I've met through the foundation, elderly people who trusted their children and ended up homeless, penniless, abandoned. Beverly made adult choices that hurt people she was supposed to love. She doesn't get to escape the consequences just because she's sorry now. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be. I went from homeless widower to millionaire philanthropist, not through luck or inheritance alone, but through refusing to be victimized by people who underestimated my intelligence and determination. And Beverly shall have plenty of time in federal prison to think about what happens when you steal from family. Thanks for listening to my story. Sometimes the old engineer knows exactly how to solve the problem, even when that problem is his own daughter. Elder abuse often comes from those closest to you. The people most likely to exploit seniors are family members who have access, trust, and knowledge of financial situations. Greed reveals true character under pressure. Beverly's entitlement and lack of empathy were always there, but financial opportunity exposed her willingness to destroy family bonds for money. Underestimating others based on age is a costly mistake. Beverly assumed her 61-year-old father was too passive and confused to fight back. But experience and intelligence don't disappear with retirement. Legal protection requires proactive planning. Sarah's will provision saved Richard because she anticipated the betrayal and built in safeguards, showing the importance of estate planning that considers family dynamics. True wealth is built through contribution, not consumption. Richard found greater satisfaction and legacy through the foundation helping others than Beverly ever would have found simply inheriting and spending money.